Okay guys, so today we're going to be starting a new part of radicals called radical equations, solving radical equations. So these are going to be ones where you're going to have to solve for x. Your final answer on these are going to be x equals a number, or sometimes it's two numbers, okay? So there's 4 steps to solving radical equations, so you could always have these out and about to look at, okay? And they're actually similar to, if you remember when we solved absolute value equations, it's actually very similar steps, okay? So step 1 for radical equations is to isolate the radical. That means if there's anything on the same side of the equation as the radical that's not in a radical, it has to get moved over to the other side. You have to get to a point where the radical is all by itself on one side of the equation. Then what you're going to do is square both sides of the equation. Okay, square both sides. Okay, then you are going to solve the equation that you get resulted. And then, and again, it's not just a recommendation, it's actually a must. You have to check your solutions, okay? Because sometimes your answer doesn't work. One of your answers, all of your answers, whatever it may be. Okay, all right, so let's look at number 1 right off the bat. Okay, so I have a radical over here. I have some stuff under the radical. I have a -3 and I have a 6. These are the examples I'm going to do are all the examples on page 1 and 2. Okay, I'm going to do a bunch of it starting on page 1 into page 2. Okay, so you will notice that on the left side of the equation, I have the radical, but do you see this -3 right here is not a part of this radical? So the first thing I'm gonna have to do is move it over to the other side of the equation. We move a -3 by adding 3, okay? So now this side is radical. Again, the 2x minus 3 is all under the radical, so it's all part of it, and now I get 9. Okay, so I've done step 1 because now I have a radical equal to a number. Step 2, like we said, is going to be to square both sides of the equation. So here we go. So I square this side and I square this side, okay? And here's the reason why we do it. If I have something in a square root and I square it, that cancels out the square root. Okay, so squaring and square rooting are opposite. It's like starting with a number and adding 10 and then subtracting 10. You didn't do anything at all. So if I square something and square root it, all the operations cancel out and I just get what's underneath the radical, right? So whenever I have something square rooted and then I square it, I just get what's underneath. And then 9 squared I have to do because 9 isn't in a radical, square it and I get 81, okay? And now you'll see, so that's step 2, square both sides. Now do you see what I'm left with is just a simple linear equation, right? I just have to solve for x now. And it's the same way we've been solving for x in all of the problems we've done. So I'm just gonna add the 3, right? So this is you guys are super good at this part. I get 84, divide both sides by 2, and I get 42, right? So I'm not gonna box it up yet because I don't know if that really is my answer, right? So then you want to go to step 4, which is to check your solution, right? So I have to do 2 times 42 minus 3, okay? And then minus 3 equals 6, right? So notice I'm going back up to this original equation and substituting in 42 for the 2, okay? So just like with, Sydney, can you grab my calculator? So just like with the absolute value equations, okay? So you can do out this math, or you could type this whole thing into your calculator. You could type the left side into your calculator to see whatever number you have. So like if you look here, so I have the square root of 2 times 42 minus 3. Now again, this might make sure you press to the right so that this -3 is outside the radical. Press enter. Do you see you get 6? So this is equal to 6. That is equal to 6. So 42 is definitely my answer. Okay, and that is how we solve a radical equation. So let's just keep practicing those. So again, you look at your equation, the first thing you have to say is the radical all by itself? And the answer is no, right? Because I have a plus 5 on the same side, I have to first isolate that radical by minusing a 5, okay? So that 5 will go away. I have rad x plus 1 equals negative 5, okay? Then step 2 is to square both sides of the equation. Again, the whole reason why I square both sides of the equation is because this radical and this squaring are going to cancel each other out, and I'm just left with x plus 1. Negative 5 squared, again, if I put it in parentheses, I get 25. Okay, I'm going to minus the 1 because now I'm at regular equation. I get x equals 24. Okay, so again, I am not going to box it up until I go ahead and do a check. So here, I'm going to go back up to the original. I'm going to put in 24 for x. Okay, and then I'm going to type this left side into my calculator. So I have 24 plus 1 is in the rad. The plus 5 is after the rad. And I'm supposed to get 0. Do you see I do not get 0? So on this side, I get 10. On this side, I have 0. Those are not equal to each other, which means this answer up here has to be rejected. Okay, I have to reject this answer. So if I only have one answer and I have to reject it, that means the answer to this equation is no solution. So it is possible that there is actually no solution to an equation. Okay? All right, let's try a couple more. Now, this one I'm adding adding some extra steps here. Okay, because I have a radical, but with a whole bunch of stuff, right? I have the plus 8 and the 2 in front. So I have to get rid of both of them, right? So it's a matter of which one do I get rid of first. Anything that's adding or subtracting, you get rid of first, just like solving equations. Do you see this 2 is technically multiplying the rad? We get rid of that last, okay? So my first step is going to be to minus the 8. So I still have this 2 in front. I have a 2x minus 6, and I have negative 4, right? So my step 1 is still not done. I still have to divide both sides by 2 because I need to get rid of that 2, okay? So now I have rad 2x minus 6. Now I have negative 2, okay? So it took 2 steps to isolate the radical here, and that will happen if there's a number in front. Now I'm going to go to squaring both sides so that this side is just 2x minus 6. This side, again, you could type it into your calculator, but negative 2 squared is 4. Then I'm left with just a nice little equation I can solve, which is I'm going to solve by adding 6, dividing by 2, and I get 5, okay? So again, before I decide that that's the answer, I'm going to do the check, right? So we're going to go back up to the original up here in purple, right? And I'm going to substitute 5 in for x. Okay? So I am going to type the left side in with the 5 replaced for x. Remember, we're going to hit to the right because that plus 8 is outside the radical, so make sure it's outside the radical. So you just press to the right when you're done with the radical. That's supposed to equal 4. It does not equal 4. So I end up with 12 equal to 4. Since that's not equal, this 5 has to be rejected. So this is another case where the answer is no solution. It does happen. Okay, so we get no solution. Okay, number 4 in the packet. Do you see there's only one thing outside the radical, so I only have to do one step to get rid of it, which is going to be to add the 5, right? So I have 3 plus x equals 3, right? When I do the adding, I am going to square both sides, and I get just 3 plus x. Remember, the whole point of squaring is to get rid of that rad, equals 9, minus the 3. Okay, I get x equals 6. Okay, so again, I'm going to do a little check here. So I have 3 plus 6 with the minus 5 on the outside is supposed to equal -2. So I'm going to check that with my calculator. 3 plus 6 under the rad, press to the right to get rid of the rad, minus 5 outside does equal -2. So since I get the same thing on both sides, that's a keeper, and that's my answer. Okay? Number 5 is kind of interesting because there's 2 rads in it, but do you see, again, both rads are isolated, so it might seem like, oh my gosh, this is so hard because we have rads on both sides of the equation, but it's actually easier. Since both rads are isolated on each side, if we were to jump right to step number 2, where we square both sides, do you see this side, the radical and the square cancel each other out, so I just end up with 3x minus 1. Same thing happens on this side. I just end up with 5x minus 17. So that's it, a quick square both sides, and there's no rads, and then it's just a regular linear equation. So this one, I'm gonna minus the 3x over to this side because you see now we have x's on both sides. So I do have to move the x. I get 2x, and again, I went that way to keep x positive, but it doesn't make a difference which side you move it to. But since I move my x's here, I have to move the 17 over to the other side. So I get 16 equals 2x. Divide by 2. So here I get x equals 8, right? Again, not gonna box it up yet until I do the check. So I do 3 times 8 minus 1. See if that's equal to 5 times 8 minus 17, right? So I do rad 3 times 8 minus 1. That answer, it's a little weird. It's like 4.7, looks a little crazy, but let's see what happens when we do 5 times 8 minus 17. Look, it's the same crazy decimal, right? So either way, I get 4.8 equals to 4.8, even if we round it, but it ends up being the same crazy decimal, so that must be the answer, okay? All right, one more. Let's end with another one that's got multiple steps. Do we see we have multiple steps for step 1? Okay, step 1 is actually a 2-step process because there's 2 things not in the rad. That minus 5 and that 4 are both outside the rad, so we have to get rid of them first, right? So remember, we get rid of the plus and minus first. So we're gonna add the 5. Okay. 5s are gonna go, and I get 20. Then we get rid of the multiplication by doing division. So now I have 6m plus 1 equals 5, okay? So now I have an isolated radical, so I'm at the square both sides step. And here again, it's you don't have to square anything, it's just you get what's underneath. 6m plus 1 equals 25. We're gonna minus the 1. 6m equals 24, divide by 6, and we get m equals 4. Okay, let's see if it's a keeper. So I have 4 times 6 times 4 plus 1 minus 5 equals 15. Okay, so we're just gonna type that whole thing into our calculator. So the 4 is outside the radical. Then I have rad, and it's 6 times 4, and then it was plus 1. I'm gonna end the rad by moving to the right, and I'm gonna have that minus 5. Press enter, it's supposed to equal 15, and it does equal 15. So since I do get 15 on both sides, I can say that m equals 4 is my answer, okay? So 4 steps, okay, and it's the same 4 steps. Again, you could, if your radical's already isolated, you could skip step 1, but you're always gonna have to square both sides. You're always gonna have to solve the resulting equation, and you are always gonna have to check your answer. Okay, That's it for today.